All right. Thank you. Thank you. So that previous slide said AeRO/CAUDIT. I have nothing to do with CAUDIT. They're my friends, but I have no role in them. Similarly, in a similar vein, as Mary mentioned, she's just one person as a spokesperson, as we all are for AeRO. There's no office holders in AeRO. There's no particular reason why I'm reporting about this particular activity. In fact, I'm probably, of all the organisations involved in this one, I'm perhaps least involved. But I happen to be next in line, and I stepped back later than everybody else and came to volunteering. So, as Mary mentioned, we had a number of forums in 2012, and yeah, because the session's being. Oh, okay.
Everyone can hear you, but for the recording.
All right. Okay. How about that? I hate standing behind the lectern. Anyway, as Mary mentioned, we had a number of forums in 2012, and we took quite a lot of care in identifying what particular activities it made sense for AeRO as an organisation to take some initiative with. There's a lot of, this is a very complex landscape of organisations, as we all know, and it was very important that we didn't replicate, duplicate and all that sort of thing, but identify where it made sense for an association of our organisations to actually provide a forum to go forward. And as Mary mentioned, we had a survey, and these were the results, and we were quite surprised at how quickly and easily everyone bought into these activities as being necessary, and there was no one else looking at these. So this is an obvious thing. So the AeRO model for getting these things to happen, to get everyone in the room, have a conversation, and then say, who wants to volunteer to help? Everyone puts up their hand, you write their names down, and you go, off you go, and then AeRO steps aside. So we're not in any way or in particular driving it. We're a forum for getting people together and allow the needs of the participating institutions and organisations to drive. And so also, as Mary mentioned, we picked, this was the survey results. There's obviously a number at the top that are important to a lot of people, and then there's some more. So we picked two to get going with early, which were closely related, and that is the development, it's the catalogues of e-research tools and services, and Helpdesk services, how we support researchers utilising these services. You'll see, if you can read the numbers there, there's very little separating some of these. So we picked those two because they're closely related, and I'm going to talk about this one. Okay, so sorry, that's just reiterating that. So we established working groups, keeping in mind that we only started talking about this about 6 months ago, so we haven't actually been sitting around for a long time contemplating this. The observation really is that there are many e-research services currently being developed, okay, and a lot of them are being developed by projects. A project has a finite lifetime and eventually will go away. These are often led by research groups, which is absolutely necessary to make sure the requirements are appropriate and they're going to be used. There's no, in many cases, they're e-funded, there's no possibility of getting a budget line item for user support. And so we're in a situation where it's not the number one priority for many of these projects to have user services, user support built in. We obviously have a complex landscape of service developers and providers, and there's a fairly clear recognition that a coordinated approach leads to a more cost-effective and better user experience. If everyone has a rough idea of what's a minimum level of service that's required and can share notes about that, there's going to be a better outcome. Also a recognition that currently most uni help desks are not able to do much to support most e-research services provided by external suppliers. I think that's a fairly axiomatic position to take. What's more interesting to me is that most university help desks actually do want to be able to support researchers using the e-research services that are provided, and given that most of them come from outside of the university, they want to be in a position to be able to support them. And this is something that definitely encouraged me, so we need to do something to make this possible. Clearly, a help desk can't do anything if they know nothing about the service. So what happens now? So if you're probably aware of the, I think it comes from ITIL v3, the tiered model for service and support. Tier 0 is self-support, where people look after themselves. Tier 1 is really the help desk, where you ring up to when it doesn't work. And then Tier 2 and Tier 3 are the escalation paths behind that. Sorry, I'm not the author of this picture, but basically what this is trying to say is that for Tier 0 support, it's really not very mature in most e-research services. Most e-research services that are developed don't front and centre try and offer self-support as a key part of what they're doing. Sometimes they'll think about it afterwards. Some of them are really good at this. The most mature of these sorts of services that people use are those provided by commercial providers. You go to Dropbox, it's easy to use. You go to Skype, it's easy to use. There's a lot of self-support possible through those sorts of tools. For most researchers, the fact is that Tier 1 support is largely provided by universities. Okay, and most of them are set up professionally. They know what they're doing. They're mature in operation, but they just don't have the information to hand to be able to help Tier 1 support requests from e-research service related to e-research services. Tier 2 and Tier 3 may or may not exist, and particularly if it's a service is developed by a project that goes away, they're likely to disappear completely. So that's where we currently are. So what's the vision for the future? Basically, the vision comes in two parts. One is that researchers or users are given a rich enough toolbox that they can self-support as much as possible. So the real key to this is that, you know, the 80-20 rule is to get 80% of all the requests self-supported, coupled with a sensible model for how Tier 1 and escalation paths occur within universities. Okay, and I'll go into a little bit more about that. So sorry that text is a little bit small, so don't bother trying to read that. So what are the elements of the solution? So I think the elements of the proposed solution are maximise opportunity for researchers to self-support. Oh, this is fairly obvious. Provide a framework or toolkit for service developers to assist developers assist support through third-party help desks. So say I'm a developer of a e-research service. If my KPIs are around service uptake, about how many people use it, or I'm just interested in that happening, then it's in my interests to outsource, in a word, Tier 1 support to university help desks. Right? Now, they've put their hand up to do that, and so that's an offer too good to refuse. The other element, as I mentioned, is linked up tiers of support. What happens when Tier 1 can't answer a help desk, a support question from a researcher? Another key element of the solution, which is a pragmatic one rather than a sort of an architectural or design one, is that there is actually a project just about to commence, a funded project where the AAF has funding to develop a user support framework for itself. Okay, and it's an example of an e-research service where it's actually quite hard at the moment. If it doesn't work, if you try and log into an external service through your AAF credentials and it doesn't happen, what do you do next? So it's a really good example of a fairly simple, basic, universal service where a little bit of framework behind that can actually add a lot of value. So they will the AAF will go down the process of designing and defining what that is, and this broader activity can leverage off that. So, just to go into that in a little bit more, so the first part of the solution is to aim to maximise the opportunity for researchers to self-support. So this is obviously the best thing to do. And there's a couple of elements to that. The first one is better designed and engineered e-research services to reduce support workload at each level. So if it works and it's easy to use, you're going to get a lot less Tier 1 support requests. So that's fairly important. And you can get big wins with a small amount of effort there. So making sure that services have some decent user design built in and appropriate testing and so forth. The second element is enable to researchers to locate services as much as possible through the Research Services Catalogue, which is the companion working group, which Patricia will talk a little bit about following from me. Obviously, if people can find what they're looking for without ringing up the help desk, then that helps a lot too. And the third element, in terms of helping users self-support, is to encourage and support crowdsourced support. So this is particularly important in research communities where they ask their colleagues and they ask their friends, and everyone knows now that you're more likely to get an answer to your problem, your IT problem, from Google than you are from the IT help desk. Okay, so recognising that there's a body of knowledge out there that can be shared, and encouraging and supporting that. So that's part one. So the second part is about enabling Tier 1 support to occur. Okay, and this is really to enable Tier 1 support to occur at any level, at any organisation that wishes to provide it. So I guess this is an observation that researchers will look to a number of help desk options for Tier 1 support. So some of them will ring the university ITS Central Help Desk. Regardless, they'll just go, oh, this doesn't work, I'll ring them. Some will have a friendly faculty IT person that they might be able to ask. Some will ring an external service provider that they might think has something to do with the service. They may be right or they may be wrong. Some will ask their friends and colleagues or their user community, and some people will just ask whoever walks past. Okay, so this is the reality of Tier 1 support. Okay, and some of those enterprises may wish to offer Tier 1 services, and certainly University Central IT does. And what we want to do is to provide a knowledge basis and a framework such that any organisation that puts its hand up to offer Tier 1 support can do that. Okay. The key thing there is to establish the knowledge base and the process for escalation. So basically what the idea here is that if we put out a framework or a toolkit that allows a new service provider to fill in the gap, so to speak, and that knowledge base can be ingested into the central system, and anyone offering Tier 1 level support can tap into that. Coupled with that is training programs for support staff. So the best person to write the FAQ for a service is the person that developed the service. And these don't need to be heavyweight, but just small amounts of effort will go a long way from nothing to a reasonable first start. And actually just to write down what the escalation path is if it exists. So these are this is taking a low-key, lowest common denominator, start from a low base approach. The third element is to have linked up tiers of support. So this is where you actually have an efficient common ticketing system, for example. You've got escalation paths. This is all industrial strength user support. And this is part of the long-term vision, but we all know that's going to take a while to get there. So there is a proposed work program, and it kind of comes in 3 chunks, which is sort of described here. And they are partly independent, and each one of them will actually add an element to the solution. And these 3 chunks roughly correspond to what I was just talking about. So what is the proposed work breakdown? So we actually got this far already within a couple of months. So we start from the bottom, and if you've got $500,000 to spend, this is roughly what it would be sensibly to do with it. You'll need to employ someone to do it, someone to manage it. Put a bit of effort into the user support team. This is the Tier 0 support. Putting together a framework on what would be the sort of knowledge and information that a service provider should provide into the system, and establishing a model for how formally or informally you want to structure a system where service providers can actually formally register to be a partner into the system, or where they just publish a bunch of de facto standards and let people swing it. An important part of this is recognising that most research groups that are building tools don't have access to user experience expertise, and so by having that available that can come along and help as people wish would be useful. bits and bobs adds up to about $500,000. Where are we? Where's the status? So we have a report and a proposal, and this is available for anyone interested to consider. This has only just become available, so we haven't actually run it by anybody yet, so this is hot off the press. It is actually up there if you want to go and have a look at it. We would like to start soon, first quarter next year, if at all possible, because everyone's in a mad rush developing their Nectar and ANS and other e-research tools, and this is something that's going to be difficult to retrofit. It's something that you want people to consider early on. So we don't want to miss that boat. So what are the next steps? Well, we want to circulate the concept document to interested parties. One thing that the next step from that document is to identify more clearly how the partnership with the AEF User Support Project will work. And also prepare a more detailed value proposition. So we're going to actually be going around asking people to chip in. So this is going to, the model for this is there's a large number of parties that are likely to benefit from this, and we'll be asking everyone to dip into their pocket. And so we need to actually articulate that value a little bit better. Then we need to find the money to do it. And there's a list of potentially interested parties. Now, if you enumerate all of those out, there's probably about 60 or 70 parties on that list. Divide $500,000 by that much, we're not actually going to be asking for much from each one of them, but each one of them we're going to ask is going to have to be happy with the value proposition on the day. And then go. That's what we do after that. So we're pretty keen to get this underway. So if you're on that list or interested, we're very happy to talk to you about whether or not this is a sensible thing to do from your perspective and whether you want to be part of it. Thank you. They're the members of the working group. Particular thanks to Neil Talander and Paul Sherlock, who did all the work. And they're all the people that participated and whose input has been most valuable. And you will notice that I'm not on that list. So I'm channeling. But I am prepared to answer questions on their behalf, even though I didn't have anything to do with it. So, thank you.
Thanks very much. Ian, I particularly like your comment because I'm in sales. I particularly like your comment about bits and bobs for $500,000. So, if any of you receive a proposal from me in the near future, I'd like to use that in my terms of business. And I know you won't object to it.
That's right, absolutely. Yeah.
Any questions for you?
No.
Was there anyone, Patty, were you going to speak?
I was.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we've got some time.
Okay.
We have, just do a quick time check, we finished here at 2:15, so we've got about another 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
just before you do, why don't you ask the people to put their hands up who would be willing to participate in using the product from this and might be prepared to pay for.
Okay, I'll ask that question. Okay. So the question is, who would be interested in participating? And participating means financially contributing as well.
Those are two different questions.
So.
Participation costs. Okay. I'm not in a position to sign any checks.
No.
I love the idea. I would definitely use the cost.
Okay. Thanks. So I think that was about half the room. Terrific. Excellent. Yeah, great. Okay, thanks. Sorry, Nathan? Obviously, you do need to limit the scope, and I think the trick for something like this, which is so open-ended, is you do it in an agile way. You start off with the most important, you keep going until you've had enough, basically, or someone comes along with more. And there are some quick wins, I think, with some of the base stuff, and there's some lofty goals that are a bit harder to achieve, and you put them off for later.
Did that actually have, was it using national infrastructure behind it? Like it seems like it will need ticketing systems starting to be set up, or is it only strategy?
Yeah, so I think like a common ticketing system, I think is something that require a fair bit of agreement before it'll work, right? So I think that's in the lofty goal category. The bits before that, which is putting together a toolkit or a framework which you can give to a service developer to say, if you do all these things and provide all this information and then publish it into this knowledge base, that will help everybody. That's a much easier starting point.
So
Yeah.
it's getting the minimum of each project in place so that the full support model later could be fully functional.
I think so. Given that we're at a situation where there's nothing and there's the imminent danger of nothing happening, you can go, every incremental step is a good one, and you can keep going up until the point where you feel you're supported to that.
Sounds exciting. It sounds like we planned it. I just enjoyed that. It's great.
I'm impressed. I had nothing to do with it. I'm impressed.
In the interest of time, I'll just hold those discussions. We can have them afterwards in the break because we've got a break later than next. I'd like to introduce you. Oh, by the way, thank you very much, Ian. I'd like to introduce you to Patricia McMillan from CAUDIT. She is the Director of Strategic Initiatives. Thank you.
Can we go back to Ian's slide about the survey results slide, if you can pull that up.
It's in the first one as well.
For those of you who missed Mary's presentation and the first part of Ian's presentation, AeRO has formed three working groups, but this session's been talking about 2 working groups, based on the results of a survey that was conducted at the first National AeRO Forum in February this year. And the 2 working groups that are the focus of this session are the one that Ian's just been talking about, which is the user support, and the one that I'm going to talk about, which is about the service catalog. And the 2 really go very closely together because you can't provide support unless you at least have a listing of the services that you're going to support and some information about them. And on the flip side, if you have a service catalog, there's no point in having a services catalog unless there's some way to get support for the information in the services catalog. So that's why these 2 go very closely together, and you can't really do one without the other. I placed on Justin's table some flyers, so if you'd like some more information after this session or like some contact information, just pick up one of those flyers about what I'm going to be talking about. So with the services catalog, you can see that from the results, there's a very large number of people who attended the AeRO Forum who are interested in seeing something happen about a services catalog. And I think the reason for this is that there's been quite a lot of funding for e-research tools and services. We're starting to have more and more of those available now, but they are provided by disparate providers, and it's very difficult to find where can I find information, how do I even know that these services exist, and where can I find some information about them. And there's 2 reasons that's needed. One is for the people providing some sort of user support, which we talked about before, and the other reason is one that was on one of Ian's slides, which is crowdsourcing information. So that if you can find the answer yourself, then you don't need to call someone for support. So these are a couple of reasons that the services catalog is really important. And there isn't one where all of these services are currently available. And so, for example, the services that Intersect provides, Ian was telling me, they've got quite a number of member universities in New South Wales. And for the e-research services that Intersect provides, they need to talk with each one of their members about how to get each one of their member universities about how to publicize the information about those services, how to work that into a services catalog. And so if you can imagine with all the other service providers that provide a small number of services, talking with all of the universities in Australia, it becomes a bigger problem to solve. So This is what the Services Catalog Working Group is looking at. We've got quite a large number of universities interested and other organizations interested. I'd particularly like to thank the University of Sydney and the University of Melbourne for taking a strong interest and spearheading these things. But we also have QUT, QSIF, all of the AeRO organizations are interested, CSIRO, RDSI, Nectar, the AAF. They've all expressed interest in being involved in a major way in the services catalog effort. So we're looking at answering a series of questions and doing each one in a series of short sprints. So in the first sprint, we're looking at identifying a small number of services. And to answer the question, what is the information? What is a standard set of information that we should provide about these services? So that's the question that we're looking at for the first sprint. So if you are a provider of e-research services and you're interested in the idea of having some sort of national services catalog to promote your services, we're interested in talking with you about this first stage. What's a standard set of information that we should provide about services? And then in the next stage, we'll look at some institutions that have services catalogs and try to answer the question, how does it make sense to work in with their current services catalog workflow? Does it make sense to integrate something into their services catalog, or does it make sense to have a single national services catalog, or does it make sense to have a combination of the two and to have options between the two? And then following that, when we've got the answers to some of those questions, we'll be looking at what sort of technology does it make sense to have such a services catalog with. Now, like the other AeRO activities, there's no bucket of funding for this. So we've got some organizations that are willing to assist us with putting in the resources to answer some of these questions to begin with. And then once we have the answers to these questions, then we'll be looking at if we have a national services catalog, what do we need to really put that into place, sustain that, how much will it cost, and who's willing to contribute in the same way that Ian asked who would be willing to contribute to user support. So I think we've come to the end of the time. I'm happy to take questions, and if you'd like some more information, there are the flyers on Justin's desk.
We do have some time for a few questions.
Once the services catalog is set up, who will maintain it?
That's an open question that we will need to answer. And I think the answer is there should be some stable entity that exists that can continue to operate the services catalog, and there might need to be a subscription model, for example, for the people who are using the services catalog, the people who are contributing services into the catalog, people who are consuming the services from the catalog.
You mentioned in exploring what might need to be in the service catalog, what might need to be recorded in services. You also considered talking to potential customers and what they need to know to decide.
Absolutely. Absolutely, we need to talk to the potential customers. Customers fall into a couple of different groups. One are the end user consumers, and another group is the people who are using the information to provide support.
Have you identified any projects overseas that you're looking for?
We've identified some projects that we want to learn some lessons from. Because those are important. We do have a list of them. I can't name them for you off the top of my head, but in particular there's been a number in the UK that we want to look at that tried to do services catalogs initiatives, and for one reason or another it didn't take. So those are obviously ones that we need to look at further. If you've got some candidates also that you think we should look at, we'd like to hear about that so that we can add them to the list.
Considering the fact that more e-research services are federated, have you considered tying the catalogue in with the AAF services catalogue? I don't mean using the AAF services catalogue in isolation, but somehow combining the two, maybe with the ones that are AAF services, federated services.
Yes, we are talking with the very closely with the AAF. So there's several different ways that we can talk about integrating with the AAF. All kinds of possibilities there. One is in the standard set of information that we've got about the services, mark whether or not it's AAF enabled, so that we know that information. Another way is looking at the workflow. The AAF is one of these organizations that does have a services catalog already for the services that are enabled by the AAF. So we can talk with the AAF about their workflow and possibly any sort of synergies that we might be able to get there. So for example, maybe when a service gets registered with the AAF, it can also go into this services catalog. Maybe the AAF services catalog could be created out of the information that is that's provided in the services catalog. I could see possibilities for it going either way. And then there's also using the AAF authentication itself as part of the workflow of this services catalog. So if you are someone who's putting in the services to the services catalog, the AAF could be how you authenticate to the services catalog. And if you are an end user who's using the information in the services catalog, you might authenticate and provide comments about the services or rate the services using AAF authentication.
Folks, make this one the last question, then we have to take our break. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe should be the first question. What's the definition of service? Do you have one?
This is a very good question, because we've got a couple different camps on this. There's one school that says it's only a service if someone is actually providing support for it, because if someone's not providing support for it, then it's not a service. We've got another school that says, but what about some of these great tools that are out there that we're creating in this community, and maybe if they just had a little bit more promotion or a way that people could start using them, even though they have limited support, that could qualify as a service, and that could be really good. It could become a service, so it could be a way to promote them.
You've got tools, services, projects, software, and all of those sort of overlap with each other a little bit. It is an offline downloadable tool. Is that a service sometimes? Is something that's privately used only within your institution? Is that a service? Does that have to be public? Does that have to be...
Exactly. So here is our current thinking on this, which is very open to change. Our current thinking is that in that standard set of information that we collect about a service, if you can provide lots of information about the support, hours of support, phone number, email, that kind of information about support, then your service gets automatically labeled as, a five-star service. If you can't provide that sort of information, it could still go into the catalog, but it might not be a five-star service. It might be some other level of service. But if enough people start using it and provide their own ratings for it, their own comments for it, then it might get further uptake. So that's our current thinking.
Okay, folks, we've run out of time. Thanks very much, Patricia. Thank you.